The truck trundles along the busted-ass desert road. If you can even call it a road. The track is so covered with dust and fine grains of stone that it is almost one with the endless sea of surrounding sands. Tumbled pebbles that have fallen from nearby islands of dry brown rock send tremors through the vehicle as they are crunched beneath the tires. Our truck follows on behind another. We are part of a deliberately small recon team with the aim of scoping out a lesser mapped region of Kandahar. There's a suspected Taliban nest not far from here, and any intel we can return will be of valuable use. We are part of a three-pronged approach. The fight continues in Kandahar city, in which hundreds of American soldiers and retrained Afghani police officers will do their best to maintain order. Secondly, the outskirts of the city will be fortified with new checkpoints, barracks, and patrols that will attempt to check insurgents and weapon makers hitting in and out to the surrounding desert. And third, the rural areas, the wastes, areas of suspicion in the mountains, all set to be run through and cleared of Taliban. And it is of this arm of the attack that my team and I are involved. The truck hits a large crater in the road, and the three of us in the back are violently rocked from side to side. Opposite me, a man named Xavier grumbles and swears under his breath, but our colleague, Ibrahim, remains silent. He is our representative from the Afghan armed forces, and he rubs his hip with the winds. "Wanna watch where you're fucking going?" Xavier barks up to the driver. Our driver, Nick, half turns to us, glancing over his shoulder. "Easy," he mutters. "It ain't my fault. See the guys ahead? They're being morons, playing around like kids, swerving all over the damn road for no reason. If they were driving straight, I'd have a better idea of where the potholes are." I rest my hand on the back of the passenger seat and peer out through the dust-marked windscreen to watch the truck in front. Sure enough, they're making an apparent game of driving as childishly as possible, forging patterns in the dust with the tire tracks. The corner of my mouth twitches with disdain, and I reach out a hand to Xavier. "Give me your radio, man. They need to knock it off." Xavier tosses it to me, and I bring the device up to my mouth. "Convoy lead," I bark into the speaker. "Cut that shit out immediately, understand? You're in no..." My sentence is cut abruptly in half as a loud vehicle rattling blast bursts out of the ground ahead, tearing through the truck in front and sending a shockwave back down the track towards us. I catch a brief glimpse of a cloud of sand, and the obliterated pieces of the convoy lead fly out in all directions. Then I shield my eyes as a ripple of wind strikes our vehicle. Nick swears, and the truck skids and swerves from the road, and I feel my body tug against the belt as the truck tips sideways, slamming hard into the sand and skidding to a halt. My ears ring. Bright spots flash beneath my eyelids. A terrible ache throbs along my right-hand side, particularly my shoulder and my hip, and the vehicle hisses with defeat. I groan. "Everyone alright?" I ask, blinking as my sight is returned to me. I am given words to the affirmative from Xavier and Ibrahim, from Nick, and from the man in the passenger seat, Weston. "Fuck's sake," Xavier fumes, slamming his fist against the truck wall. I grimace and unbuckle my seatbelt, slipping to the ground with a clunk. I crawl to the truck's back doors and kick them open, the sunset desert light spilling quickly inside. "IED," I say simply. "Could have been late 2 years ago. Could have been late this morning. Prepare for an ambush. Let's fucking go, people." I clamber from the truck, and the others rapidly follow, Xavier and Ibrahim stumbling and dropping to the wall-turned floor of the truck below them with heavy thuds. My rifle is raised, and defensive positions are taken around the flipped truck as Nick and Weston climb free from the wreckage to join us. My eyes dart around the desert and across the surrounding pillars and standalone columns of rock. The convoy lead has been destroyed. A smoldering metal ruin smokes at the side of the road, with streaks of scarlet blood and shimmering oil splattered across the sand. I suppress an urge of rising emotion, and I quickly relay the relevant instructions to my team. Xavier and Ibrahim fall back to the nearby rock, doing their best to keep well out of any potential lines of sight as they watch over myself, Nick, and Weston. As a trio, we approach the wreck of the convoy and check for any potential survivors. My face is held in a steady grimace as we efficiently and carefully examine the remains of the vehicle. The metal has been split and torn, and its largely disconnected pieces are strewn over the sand. A team of 5 occupied this truck. The first 4 we find are expired. Once people. Now, just bits of meat and bone. The 5th is alive, but in bad shape. He's missing a leg. A piece of shrapnel has carved up the right side of his body, and he leaks into the dust, his white matte eyes staring up at the sky, unblinking. I drop down onto one knee and clutch his hand, watching as he wordlessly speaks his final incoherent thoughts. And then, he too is gone. His name was Joseph. I clench my jaw and remain with the man for a moment longer. Then, I rise to my feet, as to linger here would be an incredibly foolish thing to do. Hypersensitive to my environment, a fleeting flickering shadow shifts in the corner of my eye across one of the rocky hilltops. I swivel around in an instant, drop back down to a crouch, the sights of my rifle aimed at the exact side of the movement. It is, however, nothing more than the shadow of a circling bird, a large one, but of no threat to us. I sigh and spit onto the sand, looking to my comrades and gesturing them to follow back to the relative safety of the positions taken up by Xavier and Ibrahim. Our boots make little clouds with every deliberate step, and when I am close enough to Xavier for the man to raise his eyebrows at me, I shake my head. The man swears and spits onto the rock, and we take up our positions. And we wait. We wait to see if there will be an immediate response or an ambush of any kind. Xavier fixes the thermoscope to his sniper and attempts a thorough check around our surrounding area. "No use," he mutters. "It's still too hot. The scope's useless for now. If we want to use it, we'll have to wait until it starts getting cooler." "No one here has seen any indication of an imminent threat, correct?" I ask, and am met with a murmuring of agreement. "Right," I say. "Then, let's head down and check the state of our own truck. Xavier, you stay here." Xavier nods, and the rest of us clamber down back to the road, our shadows starting to stretch along the desert with the sinking sun. Our own truck now lays on its side. The hood is dented, and the lower left section protecting the tire is all smashed up, with the headlight completely obliterated. Oil spills and pools slowly into the dust, where it is greedily swallowed by the sand. The 4 of us get as good a grip as we are able and attempt to lift the vehicle upright, but as expected, our efforts are futile. Even with Xavier, we wouldn't be able to lift this thing. It's fucked. I rub a hand across my forehead, little rivers of sweat leaking down through the grime and dirt towards the color of my uniform. "Alright, I'm calling the base," I tell my team, and unclip my radio, drawing it up to my mouth. With the correct frequency set, I send through a request for aid. The radio crackles. I look between the others as we wait for a response. Eventually, we hear, "Negative. Unable to send reinforcements. Your location has been deemed of significant risk, and anything we send through tonight is likely to be the target of serious attack. Over." "Is that so?" I reply, grinding my teeth, my finger pressed down on the button. "Since when? Over." "Intelligence received in the past hour," comes the reply. "We will monitor the situation, and you should expect confirmation tomorrow. We do not expect the area to remain high risk for a period longer than 3 days. Over." 3 fucking days? Weston hisses, raising one of his thick, dark eyebrows. He makes eye contact with Ibrahim, who sighs and rubs a hand across his face. "Requesting permission to return down the track on foot, if the situation permits," I say into the radio. "There are 5 casualties, i.e.d. 2 vehicles out of service. Over." "Granted. Over and out." The radio crackles and goes silent. That's that then. For now at least. We're on our own. There are other priorities to wrestle with, and we are deemed too high of a risk to send in a rescue force. Fuck's sake, I mutter. We cannot remain here, Ibrahim says. The sound of the IED was loud, and if HQ have decided this area is of high risk. Nice of them to fucking tell us, Xavier grunts. Ibrahim continues. We should head back along the track before it gets too dangerous. Yes, I reply with a nod. We should. So we'll stay off the road and stick to the rocks. Our going will be slower, but walking down the middle of the track is just too risky. So come on, let's head out. On me. So, with grunts and grumbles, we leave the protective little outcrop of dust-covered, desert-brown rock. And after quickly grabbing up anything salvageable that might be of use from the wreck of the truck, we begin to head back the way we came, on foot. The going is slow and exhausting, and tense. Every passing shadow of a circling bird sets my adrenaline spiking, and once the sun has begun to melt into the dunes of the horizon, and following another declined request for aid through the radio, we are left with no choice but to make a rudimentary camp for the night. Fire is out of the question, so we make do with an island of jagged rock pocked with little caves and ledges. As a team, we climb up a little higher and away from the sands below and the nearby road, providing us with a better view of the world beneath and a small amount of cover in the event we are attacked. Xavier, I say to my comrade as he connects the pieces of his sniper. Give us a rundown of the road ahead and behind. For sure, he says in the affirmative, attaching his heat scope and giving the sights of the sniper another go. Yeah, it's a little cooler now. The heat scope's working better. He looks down the road ahead and reports nothing but little warm flickers in the sky. The birds, of course, surely preparing to roost for the night. He shifts and looks back down the way we came, carefully searching across and over the rocks for evidence of concern. He tenses up, exhaling a quick, cool breath as his body goes rigid. The atmosphere around the group is sharpened at once, and the hands of everyone in the team go into action positions on our guns. Shit. Lee, we might have company. What kind? Fuck me. Looks like it could be a whole squadron of Taliban huddled up in the shade of an outcrop about a half-mile back along the track. Crap. Give me a look. Xavier shifts over and gestures to the sniper. I position myself behind it, carefully looking down the sights. The scope is pointed at one of the islands of stone a little further back into the desert. And, as known through the heat scope, a large white fuzzy blob is huddled together in wait. I grimace and watch. What's the plan? Weston asks from nearby. We'll just hold up surely. Nick interjects. They don't know we're here, right? I begin to formulate a plan as I watch the shifting shapes of the Taliban mass. It's unlikely they saw us. But my thoughts melt away in confusion. My brow furrows with concern, and I watch, bewildered, as the heat signatures of the Taliban squadron slowly, steadily, stands up. Not as a team of individuals, as logic would assume, but as one colossal being. My heart hammers as I watch this impossibility, as slowly, shambolically, the warm blob unfurls itself. It leans forward, and in the rough shape of a single gargantuan humanoid, it rises. Up it rises, until the shape is standing stock still beside the stone. Jesus Christ, I whisper. What the fuck am I seeing here? What is it? Xavier asks. What are they doing? I'm losing my mind, I mutter, pulling back and away from the sniper. Xavier, look through the sights. Tell me what you see. He gives me a questioning look and then returns his eye to the sights. He is silent for a moment. Oh my God, he murmurs. That's impossible. There must be something wrong with the sights. The scale is... it's all off. It's not off, I tell him. I watched it stand up. Watched what? Weston asks. What do you see? Xavier pulls back, and both Weston and Nick take turns looking through the sights. A little ripple of panic begins to make its way around the group, and Ibrahim stares between us, finally taking his turn at the sniper. "Giants," he whispers at last. "A giant in the desert. So, it's true." "True?" Xavier asks. "What's true?" "He's on the move," Ibrahim says somberly. "And he's headed this way." "Does it know we're here? How could it?" Nick asks, his voice rising. "We have no idea what this thing is capable of." Weston begins, rambling. "It's a trick," Xavier mutters, shaking his head. "A ploy. A trap. No such thing as fucking giants. No such thing." "Quiet," I bark. "All of you. Ibrahim, let me see." The man shuffles aside, and I crouch, returning my eye to the lens. The heat signature of the supposed giant walks slowly across the desert, leaving the rocks behind and heading, as Ibrahim suggested, in the exact direction of our current position, hidden, we hope, behind our own outcrop of stone. I switch scopes and adjust the range a little, peering through for a better look at what approaches. The mysterious being walks with the red flicker of the sun behind it, and it is cast in shadow, its features difficult to make out. That being said, however, my heart hammers with a renewed force in my chest. A strange sensation passes through me. It tells me that what I am seeing is no Taliban trick. I cannot shake the sense that whatever it is, the thing is legitimately ancient. It walks slightly stooped, but has the build of a gargantuan man. Its forearms, were they catch in the light with its deliberate strides, appear cracked and dust-covered. It walks barefoot, and in its face are two sunken hollows, dark and shadowed where its eyes should be. "Good God," I murmured, and as I do so, the giant stops in its tracks. It tilts its head ever so slightly, and in its face, in the depths of each of those sunken hollows, a little pinprick of amber-like yellow stares back at me. A stab of ethereal horror temporarily overrides the strength of my training, and I recoil from the sniper, falling back onto my elbows with a grunt, my blood cold. Visibly shaken, a ripple of unease passes through the group. They don't often see me like this. "Ibrahim," I mutter. "What do they say about the giants? The locals?" "They speak in whispers," Ibrahim replies, his voice low. "Legends, stories, tall tales for the lounges." "Yes, but what do they say?" I ask. "Quickly." "They say that the giants hunt men. They sometimes say they eat them." "Why? For what reason?" Ibrahim hesitates. "For revenge." "Christ," I mutter into my hand as I bring it up to my mouth, rubbing my jaw. "Alright, defensive positions. I don't know what the fuck we're supposed to do here, but if that thing reaches the base of the rock, we're going to load its head up with bullets. Move!" The soldiers do as commanded, and we find spots around the rock that provide us both cover and lines of sight. Without the benefit of the sniper scope, the giant appears as nothing more than a distant blur on the road, shambling towards us, but still a fair distance away. My heart rate eases a little. There's no way it could have seen us, I think to myself. It's too far away. It's a coincidence. It's making use of the road for easy passage. Nothing more. But even as I think these thoughts, I am struck by the whiplash of their madness. A giant out here in the desert. Xavier's right. Giants don't exist. Is this some kind of curious animal perhaps? Some mountain ape? It was difficult, without clear reference, to get a sense of the creature's true size. But it must have been 10 feet tall, at the very least. "Xavier, how's it looking?" "The thing's looking right at us," Xavier mutters, his eye fixed down the sights. "How could it possibly know we're here? Can it see us from there?" "We don't know," I reply bitterly. "We don't know anything about it. It's an unknown and unpredictable, potentially hostile entity, and we have to treat it as such. The giant's shadow is long and stretches threateningly down the track towards us. The giants have senses that humans do not, Ibrahim warns us. Or so the stories say. Shit, I'm trying to remember everything I've ever heard about them. The stories, they sometimes contradict each other. But supposedly, these senses were once sharp, but are now mere remnants of their former strengths. Something they lost, or perhaps something that was taken from them long ago. It's still approaching, Xavier grunts. Lee, what do we do when it reaches the base of the rock below? Were you serious earlier? You want us to shoot it in the head? Shoot first, ask questions later. Why the hell not? I reply. It's the American way after all. Hey! Weston hisses to us in a loud whisper from his position a little further away. He stopped. What gives? We return our attention to the giant, and the shadowy blur below us has indeed come to a sudden halt. He is surrounded by the shadows of birds, eagles, I believe, their forms distorted and dark in the light of the setting sun. The angle of the light gives the birds' forms an illusionary quality. Their wings are stretched and long across the desert, and as the shadows fall across the giant's form, he looks up to the sky, shielding his eyes. A long, low sound reverberates towards us and through the rock, a deep and unearthly groan that makes me grit my teeth with discomfort. My inner ears ring, and I squeeze tight to my rifle as the wave washes over us. Then, in a flash, the giant takes off, running in the manner of a human, but much faster, tearing across the desert in a new direction at staggering speed. Jesus Christ, Xavier whispers, and after a few seconds more, the shadowy blur of the giant vanishes into a crack in a tower of rock a half-mile or so from the side of the road. I realize I have been holding my breath and allow myself a fresh lungful of desert air, exhaling with relief. Sweat has begun to bud across my forehead despite the cooling temperature. What do we do now? Weston calls to us. Do we stay here? I open my mouth, consider my response with a pause, and then allow myself to speak. We follow it, I reply simply. Follow it? Xavier splutters. You're crazy, man. We ain't following that shit. Yes, we are, I command. Have you forgotten why we were sent out here? We have a duty to gather intel on the hills and mountains and clear them of Taliban infestation. Make them safe. Now, I don't know what the hell we just saw exactly, but we have a chance to do something about it, right here and now. I don't know if this is some weapon of the enemy, or something else, but we investigate, we log, and if necessary, we kill whatever we have to prevent this event growing into something larger. Damn it, Xavier fumes. Lee, look, what makes you Xavier? I turn to him. You said it yourself, there's no such thing as giants. It's a trick, or a trap, and the only people out here who could have engineered it are the Taliban, and if that's the case, then this is likely a weapon that will be turned on American soldiers or Afghan civilians. Xavier considers this. He exchanges a look with Weston, and then with Nick, as the man clambers back over the rocks to join us. Aight, he says eventually. You're the boss, just don't expect me to mourn your ass if you're eaten by a fucking giant. Noted, I say to him dryly. Alright then, looks as if we have about 15 minutes left of light, and then we'll be plunged into darkness, so be prepared. Let's move. The team rustles with unease, but they do as I say, and down we go, back down the ledges and overhangs until our feet land in the sand with clouds of dust. Moving about at night in such dangerous territory is less than ideal, but I've never, ever seen anything like the giant before in my entire life. If we leave it now, we might never see it again. Or worse, we only see it when it's deployed. If such a word can even be used to describe what it might do. Ibrahim has filled our heads with tall tales and rumors of giants that supposedly eat humans. But we'll see about that. I steel my nerves, and we set out across the desert, Us ragged band of 5. Our progress is quick, and by the time the sun had vanished completely behind the horizon, we are approaching the mouth of the cave into which the giant vanished. Why did it run in here? Nick asks us, though the question is directed largely to Ibrahim. The man shrugs. I don't know, though it seemed to me that it was afraid of the birds. Yes, or their shadows at least, Weston muses. Curious. Curious? Xavier repeats, shaking his head. It's batshit is what it is. Now, are we going into this cave or not? After you then, man, I say to him with a humorless smile, and Xavier mutters something under his breath, switching on his red light flashlight and stepping close to the jagged, rocky wall, slowly shuffling his way inside. I follow, and then behind me comes Ibrahim, Weston, and finally Nick, bringing up the rear. I had thought the desert to be silent before entering the cave, but I now realize that it was not so. The subtle sounds of the distant winds, the crunch of our boots in the sand, the soft, almost imperceptible tinkle of the dust against the rock. These sounds all fade away now, in favor of true silence, or at least, true, natural silence. The sounds of our breaths, the rustle of our fatigues, and the gentle clunk and shift of our rifles echo dimly right back at us as we hit deeper and deeper into the cave. Look, Lee, I don't like this, man, Xavier mutters under his breath. I really don't. I don't blame him. I completely agree. But duty and a twisted sense of curiosity is pushing me deeper. I hesitate. The others do too. They look at me, the red of our flashlights reflecting in our eyes like gemstones in the darkness. What is it? Nick asks. Did you hear something? No, I reply with a step of guilt. No, I didn't. I mull over my thoughts. Duty aside, I cannot ask these men to put themselves in danger like this. Not on my command. We aren't dealing with Taliban here, surely. Or are we? My mind wavers between the two impossibilities, that the giant is some kind of bizarre Taliban trick or scheme, and that the giant is real. Both seem equally unlikely. But either way, this is uncharted territory and not what he trained for. I can't make them do this, not to satiate my own intrigue. So I make a decision. You're free to return to the entrance of the cave, I say. In fact, we need at least a pair of you on guard at the mouth regardless. Nick, Weston, you two head back and take up defensive positions. Xavier, Ibrahim, you're both free to head back with them. But I need to press on. Nick and Weston exchange a look, and then nod, turning to head back to the entrance. Xavier and Ibrahim remain still. Neither of the men moves. Honestly, I tell them, you can turn back. We're in unfamiliar waters here. Look, I was just trying to encourage you to think rationally, Lee. Xavier grumbles. I ain't leaving you behind, man. I will stay as well, Ibrahim says in his thick accent, his voice low. I have a feeling I will be needed here tonight. Shall we continue? After a pause, I reply. Sure. I nod to them, and away we go, as a trio this time, deeper into the cave, the ground sinking subtly beneath our feet as we head lower and lower. The temperature drops, and around every subtle turn and from every groove in the rock, I expect to see the giant, its eyes bright and furious and filling the space with its bulk, tearing down upon us. But there is no sign of the thing. The tunnel is continuous, and there are no offshoots. In the event that we need to make a break for it, the going will be relatively straightforward at least. But the deeper we go, the greater the unease. Fuck, Xavier murmurs as we turn to him, following his gaze. Ibrahim gasps and mutters something in Arabic, and we raise our flashlights to the wall, joining our beams to Ibrahim's. Realizing we are at the edge of a sharp corner, I decide to risk a little greater light. I adjust the flashlight, and the light that falls across the cave wall increases by a small margin. We stare, us three, in awe of the sight before us. Holy fuck, Xavier grunts, taking a step back so as to fully appreciate the grandeur of our discovery. An enormous scene has been carefully and intricately carved into the wall of this cave. It goes from the dusty ground to the rocky ceiling and spreads wide in both directions. The scene is rich with activity. Dozens of spindly man-like figures are depicted across a vast field, and many are engaged with what appears to be depictions of the giants. The giants have been carved to appear far taller than what we are presuming are their human counterparts. They are bulkier, their faces are difficult to decipher, and have all been marked with crude, cryptic lines. Lines that don't correspond to any emotions with which we are familiar. It is impossible to tell if the men and giants are embracing or fighting. Some of the men are on their knees with their hands clasped before them. One of the giants appears to be looking up at the sky. Its hand is outstretched, and at the very summit of the cave wall, near the ceiling, is what I can only describe as a circle of wings. All frozen mid-flutter in the stone and marked with a crude white pastel paint. This pastel paint has been used elsewhere to represent glows or shadows, perhaps, and is the only discernible color. A line of what appears to be Arabic text has been carved beneath the great scene, and I ask Ibrahim to translate. I cannot, he mutters. This is a form of Old Arabic. It is pre-classical. I'm afraid I cannot tell you what it says. Fucking hell, I mutter, scratching my jaw. So how old is this thing then? I could not tell you for sure, Ibrahim replies, glancing over to me. But these depictions of men, of beasts, this kind of thing is explicitly forbidden under Taliban rule. Art such as this would never be permitted under any circumstances. So, what this means, Lee, is that we are either entering into a cave of which the Taliban have absolutely no involvement with, or, for whatever reason, this particular find has been deemed an exception and has been deliberately left alone. I ponder this information for a moment more in silence. Then I continue on along my way. The others follow. It almost feels as if we are stepping back in time as we descend through the tunnel. That we are returning to an ancient world, long forgotten and layered with dust. I come to a sudden stop and put a hand out. The others stop too. There's something up ahead, I say in a low voice. Do you see it? They squint through the darkness, and soon they are able to see what has caught my eye. A great stone statue sits just ahead, shrouded in darkness of course, but an obvious disturbance in the relative emptiness of the cave tunnel. Lee, Ibrahim whispers. This could be the giant. Please, tread carefully. It's not moving, I reply. You see, it's completely still, silent. Even so, the man replies. We do not know how these beings operate. I advise we move with extreme caution. For sure, I tell him, flooded with doubt. Maybe we should even turn back. And I have to say, I think we might have done enough after all. We're in way over our heads here. How about we retreat and scope this place out with a proper force on a new day? We have the coordinates for the cave's entrance, and I believe, based on what we've seen, that there is no Taliban involvement with whatever this is. And then, as if in mocking reply to the assuredness of my statement, our ears prickle as we catch the faintest of traces of voices in the distance. Echoing down the cave from around a corner beyond the statue, I can't make out what they're saying. But Ibrahim can. Arabic, he whispers. Modern. I can't quite hear specifics, but they're talking about a prisoner. Fuck's sake, I reply, my head whirling. It seems as if the second I settle on a hypothesis, it is whisked away immediately out from beneath me. God damn it, we press on then. The red light reflected in Xavier's face reveals a trickle of sweat, slowly sliding down past his ear. He wipes it away and nods, and we creep closer to the sounds of the voices, and, unavoidably, to the great statue. It does not move, or twitch, or flicker even a fraction of an inch as we approach. And as it draws nearer, it actually begins to look less like an actual statue and more like a simple cluster of rocks. Dusty, sand-covered boulders that could well have collapsed into this spot over 100 or even 1,000 years ago. The boulders are marked with cracks and craters and shadowed pits. I don't know what even possessed us to think this was a statue. We all have giants on the brain, I suppose. We kill the lights and sneak past it to the nearest corner, spreading out and crouching down, creeping through the darkness towards a source of flickering light up ahead. Slowly and steadily, we draw nearer, and the voices become louder. I catch the sound of a thick, raspy laugh cutting through the gloom, and at least we are given a good view into the center of the cave. Through the arch in the rock ahead, the ground drops a little lower, not staggeringly so, but enough to give us a good view out and over the space. What we see is a cavern turned hideout. Rugs and mats have been rolled up tight and stored against the rocky surrounding walls. Candles and gas lights flicker warningly in yellow and orange, and their light falls upon the source of the voices. 3 men in sand-stained brown-colored robes, their shadows thrown large against the stone behind them, wavering in the candle glow as if deep underwater. To one side and up high on a little ledge, accessible only by ladder, sits a pair of cages. Within each is a large hawk. One is still. The other quietly rubs his beak along his wing, rustling his feathers. My heart hammers. The hawks are a curious find. The men pose an obvious threat. But there is something else in this cavern. Something ethereal and nonsensical. And this is the true source of my sudden spike in fear. Behind the 3 men, and up against the far wall, a stone monster is held and bound. Its wrists locked tight in a set of rusty iron chains. The monster's skin has the texture of rock and sand, and the being as a whole has the appearance of a great boulder. Unfurled and stretched, massive, easily 9 feet tall at least, dusty shallow cracks like the basin of a dried-up desert lake cover the surface of its body, and in its face are no recognizable human features, just the cracks and the lines. Except for its eyes. Its eyes are where you would expect to see them. Only there is no life to them. They are black, hollow pits, lightless. The entire being, in fact, is completely immobile. Is this a statue, perhaps? I look to Xavier, and he meets my eye. He raises an eyebrow, and I can almost hear what his reply would be in my head. If it's just a statue, then why the fuck have they got it chained up? I look to Ibrahim, but he, however, does not return my glance. He simply stares at the man and the monster, and his face is tensed with fright. I return my attention to the scene ahead, to the titan chained to the wall. Is this the creature we spotted by the track? Is this what we followed all the way down here? How did the Taliban manage to capture it? And besides, I could have sworn the one we saw was a little taller. I turn back to Xavier, and I gesture for him to get Ibrahim's attention. Once received, I begin to throw up the hand signals for our approach. Our plan needs to be smart and quick. If we're captured here, our fates will likely involve torture and death, unless Weston and Nick are able to get to us in time and with success. So the plan is to take out the 2 men with weapons, and the 3rd will capture and interrogate for information. But as I'm relaying the plan, something catches my eye. A subtle movement right in the corner. A change in the shadows. Not from the cavern and its flickering lights, but from the direction of the tunnel behind us. Xavier sees it too, a fraction of a second before me. He turns to look, and I do the same. And we are greeted by the terrifying, immediate sight of the giant His hands are pressed against the cave walls, his movements utterly and totally silent, his body taking up almost the entirety of the available space. His eyes are white and black and fierce, his pupils like daggers of golden fire, and they bore right into mine, boring into mine with the light of a long-dead star. My stomach drops, and Xavier bellows in alarm. And with this, our cover is blown, and chaos breaks loose. The insurgents in the cave drop immediately to the ground, their conversation abruptly cut through as they scramble for their weapons. They begin shouting and screaming in Arabic as the giant thunders towards our position. And the only thing that Xavier, Ibrahim and I can do is to leap desperately out of the way. With the sound of a splintering boulder, a tumble of rocks down the side of a mountain, a series of cracks in the giant's face deepen and widen, and a voice pours out from its head like a raging torrent. I do not recognize the language. Hell, I can't even tell if the vocalizations are words, but they exude rage and send a rumbling through my bones. Xavier stumbles and crashes up against the far wall, and with a flash and the sound of gunfire echoing around the cavern, he jolts and releases the air in his lungs as a series of bullets are sprayed across his torso armor. He vanishes from view as the giant thunders past, and I shield my eyes as a dust cloud billows up and temporarily obscures the scene from sight. I raise my weapon and scramble deeper into the shadows, awaiting a line of clear view. The giant, ancient and terrible, and above all else, real, throws out an arm and knocks an insurgent to the side. The man strikes the wall with a grotesque crack and cries out in pain, his shots going white as bullets ricochet around the rock in all directions. Jesus Christ, I mutter through clenched teeth, taking 3 quick shots and bringing the insurgent down. He collapses to the floor with a crunch. Xavier! I shout out through the clamor. Cover me, I'm heading up to... But my words catch in my throat as I turn to Xavier's position. The man is dead, slumped against the wall, freshly splattered with blood, his eyes wide, his forehead is riddled with holes. I suppress a wave of horror and turn my attention to insurgent number 2. Occupied by Ibrahim, the two struggle over the same rifle, swearing and spitting as they vie for its control. I wait for the perfect opportunity, then fire 2 more shots. The first strikes Ibrahim's assailant in the side of his waist, the second in the side of his chest. He wheezes and collapses, twitching on the ground. The giant meanwhile has reached the back wall of the cavern and tugs at the chains of the bound prisoner. The prisoner, of course, is no statue after all, and confirms this truth by slowly raising its head, the dark pits of his eyes now glistening with the same faraway light of its would-be rescuer. The walls shake and dust bursts from the wall with every tug. But the attentions of Ibrahim and I are caught between this otherworldly display and the action of the third extremist. The Taliban fighter has hastily clambered the ladder to the little ledge and holds in his hands one of the bird cages, the hawk inside squawking and beating its wings against the bars. The insurgent hauls open the cage's door, and the hawk flies out at once, circling the small space available in the cavern above. Its cries reflected loud and clear, the shadows of its flapping wings cast large and in many directions. The reaction from the giants is terrible and immediate. The bound prisoner groans in low, rumbling tones, and it returns to its prior state, slumped and inactive, the light in its eyes extinguished. The rescuer panics, dropping to the floor in fear with a boom and a rumble. It turns and runs blindly towards the mouth of the tunnel and misses. Ibrahim throws himself out of the way as the giant crashes into a box of supplies, splintering the wood and knocking the rocks beside it to the floor with a series of dull thuds. The wall cracks upon impact with the giant's shoulder. It tries again, this time finding the tunnel's entrance, and it scrambles through, striking both walls and the ceiling as it does so with a further shower of sand. The hawk settles on a high shelf, screeching at the 3 of us in alarm, and with the raise of his rifle. Ibrahim promptly finishes the surviving fighter, sending a stream of bullets up and across his chest. The man grunts and drops his empty bird cage with a clatter, thumping into the rock before tumbling from his position and collapsing down to the floor below. We watch, Ibrahim and I, as his blood pools onto the sand, our heart rates slowly settling. "You okay?" I ask my comrade after a beat. He nods. I turn to Xavier and crouch down beside him. "Fuck," I mutter as his cold, dead eyes stare out at nothing. "I'm sorry, pal." I reach over to his face and gently close his eyelids. Ibrahim bows his head and murmurs something in Arabic. Then he turns and considers the bound giant. "Do you have a plan for this creature?" he asks me. And with a sigh and a grunt, I stand up straight and go to him, considering the beast before us. "I'm not sure, honestly. Do you?" I reply. "Yes," he says. "I think it best we release it." "And what makes you say that?" I ask. "A dangerous creature on the loose? Isn't it safer kept locked away in here?" "Locked away at the hands of the Taliban?" Ibrahim asks with a glance. "Who knows for what purpose they were keeping it here? Do you really want that? A being like this one, under the control of such lunacy as that, possessed by our enemies?" I consider this for a moment, looking between my comrade and the bound giant. "No. Very well. Then, let's get it out of here." Remembering suddenly the location of Nick and Weston, I feel a surge of clarity and reach for my radio, bringing it up to my mouth. "Nick, Weston," I bark into the device. "Watch your positions, do you hear me? There's a giant, potentially two, heading directly back to the cave entrance. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Over." The radio crackles for a second. The silence is poignant. I can almost hear in my head the exchange that must be taking place between the two men. And then comes the simple reply. "Understood. Over." I breathe a quick sigh and rub a sheen of dust-flecked sweat from my forehead. I consider the prisoner and the great chains. The giant that ambushed the six of us so successfully has done considerable damage to the wall, cracked now as it is. But the chains are thick and they remain held in place. They're connected through a series of rings attached to the walls on either side, however, and a quick rummage in the ropes of the fallen Taliban yields a set of heavy keys, and these grants me the power to set the prisoner free. "Ibrahim, are you ready for this?" I ask, looking over to the man. He has climbed the bullet-splintered ladder and reached the ledge that looks down into the cavern. He takes up the cage with the hawk inside, and the bird rustles its wings with irritation. "Hold on, let me get back down," he says, awkwardly clambering down with the cage held against his chest. "What are you doing with that thing? If we don't rescue it, the bird will likely die in here." "Fine, but get yourself into a good position. Releasing this thing is a risky move. We don't know how it's going to behave." The first hawk, the one freed earlier, watches us curiously from its perch. It rustles its wings, its head shifting from side to side as it does so. Ibrahim finds himself a spot, half hidden behind a crate at the opposite side of the cavern. He carefully places the cage behind him and raises his rifle, aiming it towards the giant. He nods at me. I doubt the weapon would have much effect if he ended up using it. But, well, it could be better than nothing. I take a deep breath and shoot one last glance up to the wall-bound monster, silent and statue-like as it was before. Carefully, with a metal jangling, I slip the accompanying keys into each of the 4 locks, and one by one, the great chains lose their tautness, spilling through the iron rings that binds them and falling lifelessly to the floor at the giant's feet with a clatter. I hold my breath, as does Ibrahim. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, the creature before us lurches suddenly forwards, its body moving in complete, eerie silence. Its footfall is heavy, however, and a cloud of dust billows up and around its legs. I tense up, ready to jump in either direction, or to make a break for it, or to raise my weapon, or whatever the situation demands. But the giant waits no longer. Realizing it is free, it tears towards the tunnel, vanishing quickly into the gloom as little streams of sand rain down from above with each step. I realize the air in my lungs and wipe off another layer of sweat from my face. Alright, I say to Ibrahim. Let's get the fuck out of here. I turn to the body of Xavier as we pass him by, my gut tightening. We'll come back for you, man, I say to the corpse. We're not gonna leave you in here. I feel a surge of adrenaline, and with Ibrahim at my side, we tear back down the tunnel, with one hawk screeching in the bouncing cage at Ibrahim's side, the other flying freely behind us, quickly overtaking and soaring toward the source of the cool desert breeze beyond. Weston's voice crackles through the radio, alarm clear in his words, but I cannot make out the specifics behind the sounds of my own breathing, the screeching of the hawk and the rattle of our weapons and various apparatus. Moonlight spills into the tunnel as the giant reaches the end and breaks free and into the surrounding desert, the remnants of the long chains still trailing from its wrists. The entrance alights with flashes of gunfire, and the sounds of the shouting of our comrades gets louder and louder. Fuck, I mutter as we draw closer to the tunnel's end. At last washed in the welcome breeze of the desert, the clamminess of the cavern behind us. Before us are the two giants, their arms raised, in rumbling roars deep, as they shield themselves from the lines of bullets coming from two different directions. Weston, I shout. Nick, stand down! I told him not to engage, but the damage is done. The larger of the two giants releases a roar and slams itself up against a stack of stone in the sand. I spy Nick a little higher up, scrambling back from an edge as the rock splits and pebbles rain down to the awaiting desert, clattering harmlessly off the giant's body. The smaller of the giants swings round an arm as it flails against the bullets, the chain attached to its wrist swinging wide and right towards our position. I duck hastily and grab Ibrahim by the collar, dragging him down with me. The chain flies harmlessly overhead with a whoosh in the air above us. We need to get these things out of here, I shout into the man's face above the roars and the rattling of the rifles. Use the hawk. Let it out of the cage. Scare them away. No, Ibrahim replies, furrowing his brow and shaking his head. He looks up, and I follow his gaze. The first hawk circles above us, screeching, its wings outstretched as it climbs higher and higher. The giants take no notice, lost in the chaos on the ground. It's not the bird, Ibrahim muses. It's the wings. The wings? I reply. What the fuck are you talking about? Just distract them, okay? Just for a minute. Give me a little time. Ibrahim! I shout after him. But the man has already taken off, sprinting towards a nearby column of stone with the cage held to his chest. I swear and turn back to the giants. The creatures seemed panicked and confused, and smashed their fists against the stone towers that stand adrift in the desert. Jesus, I murmur, taking quick aim and shooting a quick few shots into a tower of stone beside the larger of the giants' heads. Sparks and shattered shards of rock burst out, and the giant flinches away, but only for a second. It resumes its attacks almost instantly, force renewed. The smaller of the creatures cries out and up at the sky, whirling an arm in a white arc and sending another of the chains tearing dangerously through the air. I leap to the side as it swings just past me and strikes hard into the wall of the cave with a loud clang. Lee! I hear from above. It's Weston's voice, from his perch in a stone column. Lee, what do we do? Just hold on, I shout back. A little longer. Come on, Ibrahim, I think desperately. What's your plan, bud? The battle rages on. With every passing second, the terror that another member of my team will befall a fate similar to that of Xavier grows stronger. But at last, just when I think I can bear it no longer, a voice rings out, loud and clear across the desert. The earth belongs to man, rings the voice of Ibrahim, like I have never heard it before. I swivel and look up behind me to see Ibrahim atop a stone column, the cage of the hawk held firm in his hand. Return to the sands. This is a command. And with this, he activates his flashlight, not as he did before in the tunnel, in the subtlest, softest red hues, but in the brightest, most glaring white that the military tech will allow. I shield my eyes as the man becomes a lighthouse in the darkness, and the glare flickers as he moves the beam behind the cage. I turn back to the now stilled chaos, to the stone and sand and giants all washed in that same bright white glow. The shadows of the bars of the cage stretch along and thin out across the sands. But it is the shadow of the wings that I now focus on. The giants cower and raise their hands in terror as the great wings flap and beat, their shapes cast far to the left and right in both directions, magnified by the angle and brightness of Ibrahim's light. The giants' roars rise to a crescendo, and together they take off, tearing across the desert in fear. Great clouds of dust burst up from behind them as they run. But as seen so far, their movements themselves are eerily, impossibly silent. We watch them go, vanishing quietly into the vast sea of darkness, until there is no further sign of them. One with the desert. Ibrahim flicks off his light and slowly clambers down the column to join me as Nick and Weston do the same. "Fuck," is all that Nick can say when he reaches my position. His arms are all scratched up from the haste of his climb up the rock, and his face drenched in sweat. "Xavier?" Weston asks me, and I sadly shake my head. We collapse onto the ground for a minute or two, in a rough circle, staring up at the stars. The hawk rustles in its cage, and Ibrahim at last sets it free. It flies out at once, settling on a nearby stone. It cocks its head at us and looks us over. Then it too turns to the sky, and with the beat of its wings, it rises high, swooping up and into the night to follow its partner. "What made you say those words?" I eventually say to Ibrahim, breaking the silence. He shrugs. "They just came to me. I made them up. I needed the giant's attention. That's all." "I see," I reply. "Well, it was good thinking. It worked at least." "Could someone explain what the hell just happened?" Nick asks, and I put a hand on his shoulder. "Yes," I reply. "To an extent at least. But there's still work for us to do here. Come on, we'll explain as we go." I look between them, and I think about the ancient, carved, and intricate scene depicted on the cavern wall. The scene of giants and men. And we'll stick together, alright? We're still not quite out of the woods just yet. And hell, we just don't know what else is out there, do we? The others consider this as the desert breeze rustles through their hair. The night is still young, and we have a long way to go.